just a little bit till this is ready. We'll see it a little bit ahead of when we're actually ready. So I will let you just a moment. All right, we are live. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bailey Ridge Park Master Plan Public Workshop. My name is Tony Whitler. I am the Parks Planner and Project Manager for the Bailey Ridge Park Master Plan. And if you could go to the next screen, please. Patricia Farrell is the Parks and Natural Resources Planning Manager. She is not with us this evening, but I want to acknowledge her. She oversees our park planning projects. And with us this evening are our consultants. With Cameron McCarthy, Landscape Architecture and Planning. We have Colin MacArthur, Principal Planner, and Liz Avo, Landscape Architect, Project Manager, and Victor Garcia, Designer. So this evening, as in our previous meetings, it's being recorded and will also be uploaded to YouTube. It should be available by tomorrow up on the Bailey Ridge Park Master Plan webpage, and we'll be sure to provide that link to you tonight. The meeting includes a project overview and a question and answer period. We'll be using the chat and the raise hand function for the question and answer period. Your audio will be off during our presentation until the Q&A time, but you are welcome to use the chat function during the presentation. So our agenda tonight will be reviewing the Survey 2 survey results. We are going to review the preferred concept. We're going to take a look at the Survey 3 preliminary results, since that is still open, and also comments from that survey. And then we will address those comments and then move into our regular question and answer time to see if there are any further questions or comments. And then we'll close up with information on Survey 3 and our next steps. And then I just like to show our service area at each meeting just to show you Bailey Ridge Park. You can see in the yellow outline, the red line is our UGB. Bailey Ridge is a neighborhood park. It has a half-mile service area, and that extends above or north of the UGB, which is along River Road South. And it extends all the way, we've included past the city limit line, which is the black and gold line, kind of jagged, all the way up to the border of the country club there. Because you're really pretty encapsulated, you have a wide buffer of open space around your neighborhood and want to just include those folks in that area. And I will turn it over to Cameron McCarthy to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to start by reviewing some of our prior work product. And for some of you that have been in the first two workshops, this may be a little redundant. I'm sure you've heard some of this before. But for those that are new, I do want to try to bring everyone up to speed with how we arrived at the preferred design option, which we'll be presenting later today, and all the work that's been done in the background. We started this project earlier this year, about January, and one of our first tasks was conducting a site investigation, on the ground site visit, where we walked around with City of Salem Parks staff, and that led to the development of two maps. First map is what I'm showing you here, that is existing conditions, and I'll talk about next step, which was opportunities and constraints. So existing conditions shows graphically or diagrammatically what we found on the site, and what we found depicted in colors in this map were a dense Douglas fir forest occupying the northeast corner of the park site, almost half the site. There's an upland in the center of the site that is divided by Chambers Swale. There is a wetland To the west of Chambers Swale, that's shown in the blue color. There's a small Scotch pine forest in the southwest corner, and the site slopes pretty consistently, substantially towards Tayside Street from the northwest. It's almost a uniform slope going towards Tayside Street. We did find some strong viewpoints, good viewpoints at the top northwest corner. In addition, we observed fairly significant erosion along Chambers Swale, an area of the swale that had become incised or were in need of repair and stabilization. And then along the swale, we observed several large Oregon white oak trees that we consider to be specimen trees, and several smaller fruit trees, as well as a smaller informal use area at near or just off of Tayside Street with some benches and gravel. So that's what site as we currently found it, or as it exists now. Next, I think we want to show some of our opportunities and constraints mapping. And to do this exercise, we divided the site up into 6 areas that are somewhat consistent with the areas I just described for existing conditions. Area 1, we identified the Doug fir forest. That is very dense, some like thin trees. It can be very dark. It's somewhat limited by slope, but there are some opportunities for improvement that I'll talk about later on. Area 2, we noted as a more open area off of Tayside Street in the center of the park, and we thought this was a good opportunity for signage, access, potentially children's play. Scotch pine area in the southwest corner of the site is an area in itself. The Scotch pines are a little bit struggling due to the moisture. We also thought this was an opportunity potentially for some access point play, maybe seating, picnic areas. Area 4, upland, wetland, northwest Chambers Swale area. And in this area, we thought there's opportunity for trail, wetland restoration, enhancement along the swale, or next to the swale itself, which I'll move into our next area, and that is Chambers Swale and the riparian area that is associated with it. We do think because of the swale's existence and its incised nature that there's an opportunity for a crossing to link the site together, whether that's in the middle or on the edge. We can explore further in the concepts. And then restoration and enhancement that would slow or prevent erosion and slow down water and better treat water that runs through it. There's an area, area 6, identified as the North Park entrance. This is where there is an existing access, and there's an opportunity to bring that through and connect to Tayside Street. And then just in general, I talked about views from the northwest corner, looking out towards the east. There's a view down towards Tayside Street that looks out over the neighborhood. And then there's also a good view looking up Chambers Swale, and looking towards the Douglas fir forest and the landscape to the northwest. Chambers Swale, I talked about that. We need to address some of the erosion, restoration, removal of invasive species, native plantings, as well as the swale crossing. And then there are a couple points where we identified opportunities to improve access on the perimeter and from off-site. And then in both woodland areas, particularly the Doug fir forest, opportunities for thinning to improve tree health, and opportunities to get more light into the forest areas. So this product represents our mapping of opportunities and constraints. And from this, we went into the development of 3 design concepts, which were presented at the last meeting. And I will highlight what's in each concept and the differences between each concept. So this is design concept 1, and you'll see that all concepts include a series of paths that range from concrete paths to accessible crust rock paths to just bark mulch paths or trails. And the arrangement of these paths varies a little bit in each concept. That's one of the differences. All the concepts include benches for seating, viewing, resting, observing the natural surroundings. Those are in different locations in each of the concepts, depending upon the path alignments. And then this concept does include 1 picnic shelter with picnic tables that is adjacent to the Douglas fir forest and a proposed playground. And then we have picnic tables that are dispersed through the western side of the park. We have habitat restoration and invasive species removal along Chambers Swale and in the wetland area itself. Crossing over Chambers Swale, again, this crossing is an element, the location of it is an element that's different between the concepts. We are proposing a boardwalk across the wetland in this concept. Street trees along Tayside, that's another element that's relatively consistent between the concepts. Improving Doug fir forest with thinning and management to promote light and visibility. Accessible park entrances and signage, those are really consistent in all 3 concepts. And this concept, another difference is we have a traditional playground that is shown in red with the K symbol, and you'll see some different playground ideas in the other 2 concepts. So from that, I will go to concept 2. So concept 2, you can see that the alignment of trails, paths, bark mulch paths has changed slightly. There's still roughly the same number of benches and seating areas. They're just in different locations. We've got a few more picnic tables that are clustered together on the western side of the park in this concept. Same ideas for habitat restoration and invasive species removal along Chambers Swale. We've got a crossing in a similar location as the first concept. It's just a little further to the south. Boardwalk over the wetland, but again in a slightly different location. Street trees along Tayside. General forest management. Same or similar accessible park entrances and signage. And in this concept, we've got a picnic shelter with picnic tables is directly adjacent to the play area. And then this concept also includes a 3-point basketball court that is noted as item L, I believe, that is surrounded by lawn areas. And again, one of the differences in this concept is that instead of a traditional playground, which is the equipment that you would commonly see in playgrounds, we are proposing a nature playground, which would use more on-site materials, wood, rocks to develop things that children can play upon. And then finally, concept number 3, again, we're altering the location and alignment orientation of the path systems, concrete, rock, and bark mulch benches along the paths. We again have a picnic shelter, and this is adjacent to the playgrounds. Picnic tables in the northwestern side of the park. Habitat restoration and invasive species removal along Chambers Swale. In this concept, you can see that the proposed crossing over Chambers Swale is in the middle of the site as opposed to the north. There is a boardwalk crossing over the wetland. In this concept, it is closer to Tayside Street. Again, street trees along Tayside are proposed, signage, accessible entries from a couple different locations. And in this concept, we're trying to combine the playground proposals and include a traditional playground and a nature playground. And then another difference in this concept is that instead of a 3-point basketball court, we are proposing a half-court basketball court with the addition of a pickleball court. So it'd be a multi-use, multi-sport court. And this is adjacent to Tayside Street, sort of northeast of where the playgrounds are proposed. So with that, I think I've highlighted the major differences. And from this, we'll jump off to the survey we did about these concepts and how we arrived at the preferred concept. And Liz, I'll let you take it from here.
Great, thank you. So like Colin mentioned, the second survey was focused on asking folks to evaluate the 3 concepts. We asked for your overall preference between the 3 concepts, and we also asked about your preference for individual facility locations and the designs. When we asked you all to pick one preferred park concept, 55% of you chose concept 3. And we also asked about circulation on site, both in the wetland and swale area and the Douglas fir forest. About half of folks preferred the circulation in concept 3 in the wetland and swale area. And then a little less than half of survey respondents preferred the circulation in the Douglas fir forest. The second survey also asked about your preference for types of playgrounds. And over half of the responses noted that their preference was both nature play and traditional play. And we also asked about the crossings. We have several crossings in the concepts. The Chambers Creek crossing, the most preferred option was in concept 3, which is that centrally located one that Colin mentioned. And then we also asked about the crossings for the wetland, and 46% preferred the crossings in concept 3. And once again, those were, there were 2 crossings in that concept, one along the western edge of the park, and then one closer to Tayside Street. And then we also talked, or the survey also addressed what type of court design and location you all preferred. And the location that was most preferred was the one in concept 3. And the design that was most preferred was that half-court option with half-court basketball option with pickleball as well. And our last question in the survey asked about the picnic shelter location. The most preferred one was in concept 3. However, it was also the location in concept 1 was also really popular and very close to that. And I should note that both concept 1 and 3 showed the picnic shelter located near the main entrance. So those were really similar. So we, like Colin mentioned, we have developed a preferred concept. And this concept incorporates a variety of input from the entire process. and including feedback that we heard from the most recent survey 2. Just to touch on a little bit of these elements, the preferred circulation in the wetland was this U-shaped loop with a crossing at the western edge, and then also a boardwalk crossing near the street. The material that was preferred was the crushed rock, so we've shown that. And the circulation in the Douglas fir forest that was preferred was a combination of concrete and bark mulch. And those paths lead a little bit more directly to the court and the play areas. And we've included the central crossing at the swale that was preferred from the survey, as well as the combination of both nature and traditional play. That picnic shelter that's located really close to the street, as well as the half basketball court option with the inclusion of pickleball too. So our third survey is currently open, and we have some preliminary results that we wanted to share in this meeting. And the third survey is focused on the priority level of different park improvements. So I can touch on real quick at this point what our high priorities are showing up as. We have management of the fir forest to improve tree health, light, and visibility, habitat restoration at Chambers Swale, accessible paths, the crossing over Chambers Swale, as well as nature play. So those are the top 5 high priorities at the moment. And then I'll just note that a few of the improvements that are tracking as low priorities are picnic shelter, picnic tables, and signage. And there's an option in the third survey to provide a comment or question. And we did already receive some initial comments and questions. And before we hop into the Q&A, we want to take a second just to address a couple of those that we've received. So one question we got was, can there be a dog park? And unfortunately, we won't be including a dog park in this project. And the reason for that is the dog parks are not a suitable facility for a neighborhood park, and Bailey Ridge is classified as a neighborhood park. We also had a question about how does the survey feedback inform the selected facilities? So I want to note that we understand that there are some facilities that receive low responses in the surveys regarding like the level of importance that they have. And like, for example, we just saw picnic shelter is tracking as low priority. So the survey is one source that we use to gather input about what facilities are included in the design. And there are other sources that inform the process too, such as park standards and neighborhood meetings like this one. But the report that we will write is going to document the survey results that we see. And we're also going to recommend that the city goes back to the neighbors when funding is available for park development and reevaluate the opinions at that point in time. We know that this plan is going to be in place for 20 years or more, so neighborhood preferences may change over that course of time. We also had a comment about it feels like the city has a preconceived design for the park. And I do want to reiterate that this process is informed by other city planning documents like the Park System Plan and the Comprehensive Plan. And those documents include classifications for parks. And so they explain different types of parks and the appropriate facilities for each type. And Bailey Ridge is a neighborhood park, like I mentioned. So we've used facilities that are appropriate for a neighborhood park as we've gone through this process. There was also a question about drainage in the park. We wanted to note that there's a soil study underway and that information from that study will be used to address drainage for the park when we get to the development stage down the road. And other comments we're noting use that may happen from outside the neighborhood. And we wanted to mention that we're not adding large attractions to this park, like water features or a dog park, and that the master plan is focused on play and nature for the surrounding neighborhood. And one of our last questions asked about the Douglas fir tree removal. And there's going to be a more detailed analysis of the trees and their condition. And when that happens, those findings are going to guide the next steps for the maintenance that happens for the fir forest. We also had a question about explaining the timeline for the project. And Tony, I'm going to hand that one over to you. If you could answer that one.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Oh, yep.
Yes, the timing. So how it typically works, once we have a master plan approved by City Council, it basically goes into a queue, into a process whereby it will move eventually into the city's capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan where we identify funding over the course of those 5 years. Although each year that capital improvement plan is updated and approved by City Council. So once funding is identified into a certain year and that year comes about, then that moves into the budget for development. So at this time, there is no funding identified. In the current capital improvement plan, there's funding identified out in fiscal year 25-26 for some design work. So at this point, I can tell you that development will probably be at least 5 years out at this point in time. Additionally, when we get ready to develop and we identify funding, that always involves seeking public grants. We usually look for a match or close to a match of funding through Oregon Parks and Recreation or Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is a federal grant. And that usually takes another year to accomplish that. Liz, I also wanted to note the comment about posting park hours. I did bring that up to operations, and they said that they have a post in place and then realized they need more signs made up. So they have the sign shop working on signs to post the park hours. So that should be up shortly for you all. So I just wanted to be sure that that was identified. And if I could just touch base a little further on the Comprehensive Park System Master Plan, which is our overarching document for planning and design of our parks. We do look to that for standard or optional features here at the neighborhood park. And even though some of you are concerned about a couple of these features that are noted in the master plan, please be aware that these development as funding becomes available will be phased. And we look to your priorities, which were pretty clear in the third survey, and it's still open, but looking at those top priorities as we move forward to development. And as Liz said, we will go back to the neighbors when that time comes for design to see if opinions have changed at all about the facilities.
Thanks, Tony. I think we're ready to go into the Q&A session. So I'm gonna stop sharing so that I can see everybody's faces a little
Are we
better.
managing the
And okay.
the chat?
Yeah, so I can just touch on real quick. When we start the Q&A, if you can raise your hand either physically or use the raise hand button, you'll get in the queue and I'll try to keep track of who's in order to speak next. You're also welcome to type in your question in the chat box and I'll read that aloud and we can answer it that way. We'll have about 3 minutes for each question or comment. And I'll let you know when we're about halfway through your time, just so you can manage the rest of your time. Let's see if is there anyone that wants to ask a question or a comment?
I see Steve Phillips, Liz.
Oh, okay. Okay, yes. Steve, if you want to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Great, thank you. So I just had 2 questions. First of all, regarding the picnic shelter, I know it was listed as kind of low priority in the overall priority of things, which maybe pushes it out a little bit. So there's a lot of time to think about that. But in the original survey, it was listed pretty low as a shelter. Yes, everybody wanted picnic tables, but not everybody wanted the shelter. Is there a chance to reconsider that down the road when we get to the point of what are we going to build in that area for a picnic shelter? The second question has to do with the basketball court, pickleball court. Is there a possibility of moving that farther into the forest a little bit to keep balls from going out into the street, which I think could be a safety concern, and also to reduce some of the noise to the neighborhood from that pickleball court when we get to that phase of the construction? Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Colin or Tony, do you want to address those?
I can address that. Yes, Steve, thank you. Actually, I should have Colin address that as far as location. I do want to reiterate, Steve, that we will, when we get to the design phase, we will go back out to the neighbors and we will ask again for the opinion. And that would be to the half-mile service area again and see what the opinion is at that point. And Colin, can you address the location?
Yeah, and I'll preface that by saying that this again is a master planning process, and we've got several phases to go through before we get to a construction project. And really the purpose of this exercise is to try to figure out the order of magnitude for the project and the general things that are going to be included so that city can go about getting funding for the project, whether that's city funds or other grant funding sources. So we do try to identify preferred locations or based on what we know for things, but in advance of construction, there's usually always additional information that comes in, survey, maybe some environmental information that we didn't know about at the master plan that would influence a location. And so, I mean, we located that particular facility in the master plan based on a variety of factors, including safety and visibility, access, ease of how people would get to it, relationship between other facilities. But I guess the overall message is yes, there will be sort of an opportunity to sort of reconsider locations before we get to the construction phase.
Okay, I mean, I'm not questioning the location, I'm just questioning the location proximity to the street.
Sure.
Moving it back.
Yeah, we may determine once we get into construction that we do need more setback from the street. It's too close, there's a danger of like balls bouncing into the street, and we should have more setback. So those are sort of the design details that would be worked out as part of the next process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh yeah. I see Tom, your hand is up. And if you can unmute and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I have a concern regarding the parking. Is the parking on both sides of Tayside or just one side of Tayside right next to the park? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I a question. If I remember correctly, and Tony, you can help me with this. There is parking all along the north side of Tayside. I think there's parking on the south side. He confirmed that. I think there's parking on both sides, but there are several access points and crossings, so there's not as much parking on the south side as there is on the north side. Is that correct? Yeah, Tony's nodding, so that's generally
Yes.
correct. And yeah, I'll just say for a neighborhood park, this is a neighborhood park project. It's a small park. We would not recommend using up park space, park site for off-street parking. We just don't think there's the demand for it. And then for neighborhood park is intended for neighborhood people walking to it. We also don't want to encourage people generally driving from long distances and parking off-site for the park. So yeah, we think there is sufficient on-site parking to meet the needs for the park.
And there would be no marked spaces on the street for parking. It would remain such as it is.
What about cleaning up and security for the neighborhood and the park?
A neighborhood park typically is maintained once a week on a route. Unless there's something going on and you call into the office and something needs attention, then they would come in aside from that. But typically in the high season, they come once a week. So beginning spring through fall.
Okay, so this is the city will be responsible for the cleaning up and security?
Yes, parks operations.
Okay.
As far as security, we would also rely on the neighbors to be our eyes and ears and let us know of anything going on.
Because the reason I bring it up, because my mom, she used to live in a very quiet, nice neighborhood. And since they put up the neighborhood park, the area is not safe anymore. So my mom had to sell her property and move. Since I live right across from the street from the park, it's very concerning me. As of right now, the park is not open, but we have kids that play on the street right at the corner of my house. We already have problem. We have kids walking in our property into our yard, wrecking our flowers, and have ball hitting our windows. So what can you do to protect my property?
Well, I think at that point, as far as your own personal property, if it's not related to the park, I can't have parks maintenance or security come out, but you can certainly take some action and contact for some assistance, maybe our police, and ask for assistance, or talk to your neighbors if that's possible.
Yeah. Well, we do have a neighbor in this neighborhood have called the police several times. and they're not responding to the problem that he saw in the back. He think there is some illegal activity back in the far corner, and he have called the police, but they're not responding.
In the park?
If that situation is not taken care of, I am very concerning if they're going to respond to my personal property problem with the people visiting the park.
Oh, I see. I understand. So there is something going on at the park, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
So before we put the park up, I think we need to reconsider about our safety. The problem that we had before, the tree had been training down. If we have teenager go back there and smoke and drink 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they drive racing down my street. And I don't think that problem had been solved. So putting up the park right at this time, I'm really concerned unless we have this problem taken care of.
If you could email me, my email's at the end of the presentation, the issue
Okay.
that's going on in the park and the location.
Okay.
I will bring it up to Parks Operations and see if they need to contact the police to check on that.
Because my neighbor, I would like to go back there and check it, but he suggested I should not go by myself. And he has a dog with him and he walk around. I just don't want to name who it was, but there is a concern that I brought up, and I would like to ask the city to look into it before we put the park in. Because once the park is in, the problem will not be easy to control.
Well, you can email me, and the other number you can call is 503-588-6333, and that's dispatch. So whatever the issue is that you're calling on, it will go into a report, and then that's delivered to management every day so they can see that as well.
Tony, would
Okay.
you repeat that number for me again?
I'll put it in the chat. It's 503-588-6333. That's Public Works Dispatch. And that's
Okay.
24/7. And then you can let them know of an issue going on.
Okay.
Not to be used as emergency. Okay. But just,
Mhm.
something going
Yeah.
on that needs to be addressed. Okay. I will
Okay.
put that in there.
Thanks, Tom. Mike, I think you may have a question.
I have some comments, actually.
Oh, question or comment?
I assume I'm the mic you're referring to.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, and first off, I think the process has been sterile in a lot of respects. And I think given the change in COVID policies, that it needs to be a public meeting, not a Zoom meeting at some point very soon. Secondly, from what I saw the survey, the low percentage numbers of requests for different things, like my neighbor Tom just mentioned, or Steve mentioned a few minutes ago about the location and the picnic structures, and the basketball, pickleball things were rather low priority, but yet out of the 3 options we got to choose from, 2 of the 3 had both those projects in there. I think one of them I saw on an earlier slide, which was hard to define through this process that you have in Zoom. It showed like 9%, if I remember correctly. It was a snapshot. I didn't get a chance to really look at it. And yet, 3 options we get to choose from, 2 of which have those concepts, which I find troubling. Also, the parking, which is right across my street, or Tayside Street, right across the other side, I think that's problematic, or could be. I'm not certain yet. And my last comment is about the swale. I live on the swale. I get all of the erosion that the water causes into my property. I have a huge chunk of the swale on my property, and the city has been kind enough and worked with me enough to dig it out every other year, but we took out last year, I think 20 yards of fill that had come down from your park. So if there's a process and a phasing, I think you need to deal with your erosion problem. You need to deal with the water problem before we get into anything else, but that's the secondary item. So those are my concerns, particularly about the 3 options that you presented us. It's kind of like you're a hammer and everything you see is a nail. So I would like somebody to address that, because it seems odd to me if you have a 9% return on people's responses about what they want, and yet 9% of that return becomes 2 of the 3 options. I don't get the process. I'm sorry.
I could address that. Thank you. Well, first of all, with regard to the picnic shelter, as Liz was saying, that did have a low response across the board. It really did. And the reason why it's in there is because also that was mentioned, this plan will be in place for 20 years or more. And during that time, someone might want the shelter in the rain, if someone wants that shelter and it's not on the plan, then we have to go back and do another master plan process like what we're doing now. So keep in mind, it's what we call like 30,000 foot level plan. It's there. It's not going to happen anytime soon. The basketball court wasn't real low. It was low, but there were comments in the second survey that also included the desire for a court, kind of bumped it up to around 40%. So that's high enough to really consider it and then let people comment on that. There are a lot of people that are very interested in having a court, and there are a lot more people that don't want a court. So we decided the best solution is to have it in the plan. When funding comes available, we will go back out to the neighbors. If there's still a real strong desire not to, then that's what we'll look at that time. You're absolutely right. The drainage and the erosion has to be taken care of first. We've got consultants out there. I met with them last week, taking a look at the whole park, and they're going to do these folks. We switched consultants. These folks are more soil scientists, because that drainage isn't just in our property, the park, but it goes further up. So we want to see, they're looking at a variety of, aspects in their study. And then they're going to make some recommendations. So that too will also form, how we move forward as well. But the drainage certainly has to be addressed and rectified as we move forward in development. And as we develop, when that time comes, that will definitely be addressed for sure. It has to be.
Again, I would argue that I think it's important that at some point we get out of the Zoom business and get where people can actually look at the maps, which again are hard to do on this environment, and maybe great for 19, 20-year-old kid, but for people my age, it becomes rather challenging. So I would prefer that you have some sort of public forum where we can look at every one of your concepts and look at them in detail with our neighbors available at the same time, so we can have that kind of input from the neighborhood, as opposed to the electronic version. That's one of my biggest complaints. And I'm old school. I would
love to do that, Mike. I can't see either. We actually thought we could pull that off, but we aren't there yet with the city. The designs, all 3 concepts and the preferred concept are on the Bailey Ridge Park Master Plan webpage. You can zoom that up as close as you want to see. Let me know if you want something in print. I'll have something in print for you. Okay.
Well, I can certainly print it off myself. I'm not that devoid of technology, but I think it's more important to have the neighbors come together and actually communicate with one another.
I agree. I fully agree. I'd much rather meet in person. I hope we're there soon, one of these days.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And Steve, I see that your hand is up again. Do you have another question or comment?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I just had a comment on kind of the next steps. So Tony, when this goes to Swan and then goes to Parks and Recs, what exactly are you taking there? Are you taking alternative 3? And that's the only one you take, and then it kind of goes from there. What all gets included in that presentation to Swan and Parks and then City?
So when I go to Swan next week on the 3rd, I'll take the preferred concept,
Okay.
or what it is a draft park master plan. And then I'll have a presentation that will go through the process, and I will let them know, give them a summary of the 3 meetings and the surveys and a summary of the survey results. I only have, 10 minutes, I think, but, and present that plan to them. And you, of course, and anyone else, it's a public meeting, are welcome to attend.
Right.
And then I'll address any questions at that time.
So can they change what you're presenting as the preferred option? I mean, when they say, yes, we bless this plan, can they say with these caveats and make changes to that?
The board can do anything it wants. It can make any suggestion or any motion that it wants, and that can carry over to the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting when I meet with them, because that's the next stop at that point. And that would go to the board, and then of course everyone is welcome to attend that meeting as well.
Do you foresee them making any changes to what you're presenting?
Who? Swan?
Swan.
I really don't know the answer to that, honestly.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Steve. Are there any other?
I see Tom or Tommy. Tom has her hand raised.
That may be from Tommy's prior question. I don't know that it came down. Tommy,
Okay.
do you have an additional question?
Okay, I don't think she does. I think you're right. It's previous.
Okay.
Okay, well, shall we move forward?
Yeah, we don't have any comments or questions in the chat box. So I will move forward. Just 1 second. Let me pull up my screen again.
And Liz or Colin, could you post the link to the survey 3 in the chat?
Oh,
please?
yes.
Or Victor?
Yeah, I can do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sorry. I have another question, but I don't know how to get you to hear me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay. I also have a concern about the basketball, the location where it's at on survey number 3. My husband, he worked graveyard, so he sleep during the day. Is there another location that we can move it to, or does it have to be there? I mean,
Colin, do you want to read?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll provide a similar answer to Steve's question about location earlier. And I think if you're referring to option 3, that is the combined pickleball basketball court, and we've got it located in the north sort of east section of the park next to Tayside Street. We do like that general area because it's close to the playground, close to the street, sort of a center of activity in the park. We don't have too much flexibility to push it further to the east because the site narrows, and then we're closer to residents. We don't have too much flexibility to push it to the west because then we're into wetlands and Chambers Swale, and site narrows. So I think it general location, I think we're comfortable with, but like I explained to Steve, it may be that we need to set it back more from the street, or shift the location east or west. So by doing so, yes, I think there would be an opportunity to get it further away from your residence, if we can identify where your residence is. But yes, we can take that into consideration.
Yeah, because Steve's house and my house are across the street.
Okay.
And it's right across the park. And I think most of the residents who being affected negatively by the park is the people, maybe about 10 neighbor living on Tayside will be affected the most. And if my husband working at nighttime and he doesn't get enough sleep during the daytime, it's going to affect my whole family and his health.
Thank you.
So if we can move it back further to eliminate the noise, or if we can just eliminate the basketball altogether, I feel the people on Tayside are the most concerned, and the people who live far away from the park are having the same concern as we do.
I understand. And I hope I can try to allay some of your concerns about the court. This may or may not be helpful, but 75% of our neighborhood parks have a court, whether it's a full court, half court, a multi-use court. I've been in with parks for 20 years, in operation specifically for 10 years. And we just don't ever seem to have people calling with issues concerning the basketball in a neighborhood park. And when we look, we listen to that. So for instance, we used to have splash fountains in our neighborhood parks, and people did not, there were a lot of complaints, and we stopped doing that. That's why we don't have dog parks too. In neighborhood parks, we get a lot of calls. We would not do that. And I hope I can allay your fears in that I don't see this as something that's going to be a constant concern. Now, I don't know that for sure, of course, but also to let you know that development of this site is pretty far out in the future. And as I said, we will be coming back to the neighbors to see what their preference is at that time, because preferences do change over time. And this plan will be in place for a number of years. So I really want to try and allay your concerns regarding that, that concern about the noise or potential noise.
Yeah. So I know there's a few houses on Tayside that being renting out, so the owners are not here. Especially my neighbor behind me. I don't think she lives here, but the people living there are her renter. And the basketball is right in front of her house. I feel like these surveys are not completely done, that not have enough participants. And also talking about the dog part, I'm glad that you decided not to put it on, because as of right now, I don't know if Steve had problem with the smell or not, but I do. There's a trash can for dog poop to go in, and the lid has been cut a big hole so that they can drop it in there instead of lift up the lid and put it down. We can smell dog poop in the summertime when we go out there and work on the house.
I'll let operations know that. I think there's an additional hand being raised as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you, Tommy. Yeah, it's from Pat.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm on the SWAN board. I will be at the meeting on Tuesday evening. I would encourage you all to attend that. If for some reason you are unable to, I'd be glad to take information forward for you. And so I put my my email in the chat. And Tony, I guess I have a question too about the process, because if SWAN doesn't come to any definite decision, I mean, is that what happens at that point in the process?
Well, I will ask the board for a motion to take to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and they are really the main ones to hear any comments or concerns. So typically what we do is we go to the neighborhood association that the park is within, and then we take their comments or their motion or statement forward and include that in the staff report to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
So it sounds like if we have concerns, we're going to list those out, and then it goes to SPRAB anyway.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's good to know. Anyway, if someone has some information they want to share with me to take to the board, I'd be happy to.
And everyone is welcome to come to any of these meetings. So SWAN or the Park Board and City Council eventually. So we do have here, I see our handy dandy next step. So May 3rd, what time is your meeting, Pat? I believe it's at 6:30.
6:30, yes, 6:30.
I have the link to SWAN's webpage where the link to the meeting is. The webpage link is in the chat, and it's also on the sign in front of the park. So you can go to, I don't have the link to their Zoom meeting, but if you go to their webpage, which is the link I have, you can get to the meeting that way. Or you can email Pat and she can help you with that. And then from there, in June, on June 9th, this will go forward to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And then that recommendation will go forward on June 27th to City Council. And then City Council will, take that into consideration at that time.
Thanks, Tony. Let's see. I think we're at the end of the meeting, but we wanted to just note that the third survey is open, and it'll be open until May 4th. And the link is in the chat box. You can also see it, a shortened version on the screen here, as well as a QR code that you can use with your phone.
And all of these links are on the project website, either through this bit.ly link or the link that I have in the chat. And I just want to thank everyone. I thank you for your comments and participating in this process and going through this with us and speaking your comments here live. Thank you. And then May 3rd, perhaps I'll see you at Southwest Association of Neighbors.
Thanks, everybody.